The courtroom was quiet, too quiet. A silence that felt heavy, like it was waiting for something. The man sitting in the defendant's chair didn't seem to feel it. He leaned back like he was just passing time. His hands were loose, his face calm, no tears, no apology. No sign that he understood why he was even there. Just a lazy shrug and a tired look in his eyes. The judge looked at him. She had seen many faces over the years, scared ones, angry ones, even desperate ones. But this man? He looked like he didn't care. Not even a little. The bailiff stood by the wall, stiff and silent. The court reporter was already typing. The steady clicking of her keyboard, the only sound in the room. Everyone was waiting for something to happen. But the man said nothing. He didn't even look around. His attorney whispered something to him, but he just nodded once without turning his head. Then the judge spoke. "Mr. Acosta, we are here today for sentencing," she said clearly. Her voice echoed slightly off the wooden walls. "You've entered a guilty plea, and the court has found enough evidence to support that. This is your chance to speak. This is your moment to show the court who you really are." The man slowly sat up straighter. He blinked a few times. But even now was no emotion. No fear, just calm. His lawyer stood. "Your Honor, my client is ready to make a statement." He understands the seriousness of this moment. The judge nodded. "Go ahead, Mr. Acosta." He stood slowly. He wasn't tall, but he had a strong build. His hands were shaking a little. "Maybe from nerves, maybe from something else. My name is Christopher," he said, voice low but steady. "I know I've messed up a lot in life. I've done things I shouldn't have done. But I'm not the same person I used to be. I've got kids now. A girlfriend who stands by me. A mom who needs me." He glanced at the judge, but only briefly. "I've been working. HVAC, cutting hair, trying to stay clean, trying to do right. I take my mom to the doctor. I give my kids what I can. I know I've got health problem seizures that hit me without warning. It's hard sometimes, real hard." His voice caught a little. He cleared his throat. "I just want a chance to do better." He sat back down. The courtroom stayed silent. The judge turned to the prosecutor. "Does the state wish to say anything?" "Yes, Your Honor," the prosecutor said as he stood. "This man has a long history. Drug charges, probation violations, time in prison. He was given chances before, and yet when stopped recently, he was found with 11 bags of cocaine, heroin, and other substances. This wasn't a mistake. This was a choice. And now he stands here asking for another chance." He paused. "Your Honor, we've heard it all before." The judge nodded slowly. Then she turned back to Christopher. "You say you want to change, that you're not the same person. But this court has seen your past. It's a past full of broken promises and wasted chances. Do you think words are enough now?" Christopher opened his mouth, but nothing came out. "I understand you have epilepsy. I understand your family loves you. But this court has to think beyond feelings. We have to look at patterns, choices." She paused and looked him in the eye. "And right now, I don't see someone who's truly sorry. I see someone who wants to escape the consequences." The room was still. No one moved. Christopher sat there, his hands now clasped tightly. Maybe it hit him. Maybe it DIDN, single quotes T. The judge leaned back in her chair. This is not an easy decision, but justice is not always easy. Christopher glanced toward the door, maybe looking for someone. His girlfriend wasn't there this time. Neither were his kids. Maybe that made him feel smaller. Maybe not. But everyone in that room could feel what was coming. The weight of years. Of second chances. Of the moment when a judge had heard enough and still, Christopher showed no tears, no regret, just silence. Cold, heavy silence, until the judge picked up her pen and began to write. The judge's pen moved slowly across the paper, but her eyes kept drifting back to Christopher. He was still sitting stiff in the chair, staring down at the table like the answer to the future might be written in the wood grain. His lawyer leaned close and whispered something again, but he didn't nod. This time, he just stayed still. Then the prosecutor stood up again. "Your Honor," he began, "before you consider final sentencing, I want to remind the court of what was found during the arrest. Christopher didn't move. He knew what was coming. This wasn't just a traffic stop. This was a DWI with controlled substances, 11 bags of cocaine, 2 bags of heroin, 5 Xanax pills. That's not a small mistake. That's a dealer's bag." The judge stayed quiet, letting the words settle. The people in the courtroom looked at Christopher. Again, this time with different eyes. The prosecutor continued, and when asked about it, he said he didn't remember. Said it was during the Super Bowl. Said he must have blacked out. He paused, then looked over at Christopher. He doesn't even remember what he did that night. That's what he wants the court to believe. The judge turned to Christopher. "Is that true?" Christopher finally lifted his head. "Yes, ma'am. I was partying. I drank too much. I passed out. I don't remember the rest. Do you understand how serious that is?" she asked. "Yes, ma'am." The prosecutor wasn't finished. He's been given probation before, more than once. Deferred adjudication. Second chances, he never completed them. The moment things got hard, he disappeared. Every time. The judge looked at the defense attorney. "Your response?" He stood up, holding a few papers in his hand. "Your Honor, yes, my client has a past, and yes, it's serious, but look at his present. He has a job, he's starting a business, he's supporting 2 children. He's living with his mother who has severe heart problems and depends on him to drive her to the doctor twice a month. And he's doing all that while fighting epilepsy." Christopher was watching his lawyer now, like a student in class. His hands were still shaking, resting in his lap. His lawyer added, "He's not asking to walk free. He's asking for treatment. Supervised probation, random drug tests. A real chance, under the court's watch, not to escape consequences, but to turn his life around before it's too late." The judge turned to Christopher again. "Do you want to speak?" He nodded and stood. "I know I've done wrong. I know I've messed up before, but I never had help. Never had anyone show me how to fix it. I'm tired. Tired of being the guy everyone expects to fail." He paused, then said, "My kids, they think I'm better now. They think I'm trying. And I'm not lying about that." The judge didn't say anything. She was just watching him closely, trying to see something, maybe honesty, maybe regret. "I got epilepsy. It hits out of nowhere. I've had seizures in the shower, while driving, even while holding tools. I've hit my head a couple of times. The doctors are trying different meds, but nothing works right yet. I see a neurologist when I can afford it, but I don't have insurance." He took a shaky breath. "And I'm scared, not of jail, but of not waking up one day, of leaving my kids with nothing, of my mom sitting alone in her house, waiting for me to come back from the store, and I never show up." The courtroom was still again. The words weren't perfect, but they were real. His lawyer sat down slowly. The prosecutor didn't stand this time. He just looked down at his notes. Then the judge asked one last question. "You say you're scared, but are you?" "Sorry." Christopher didn't answer right away. He looked down again. His jaw tightened. "Yes," he said. "I'm sorry. Not just for what I did, but for every time I didn't listen. For every time I thought I could talk my way out. For wasting chances. For making my mom cry. For lying to my girlfriend. For letting my kids see me like this." It was quiet. Even the judge looked like she needed a moment. But then her voice came firm and clear. "You've said a lot today, Mr. Acosta, but now it's time for the court to speak." Christopher slowly sat down, eyes locked on the judge, hands gripping the edge of the table. He still didn't cry. But for the first time, he looked afraid. And the courtroom waited, breath held, to hear what would come next. The judge leaned back in her chair, the leather creaking slightly as she crossed her arms. Her eyes didn't leave Christopher. The courtroom was still, not because everyone was done speaking, but because now it was the judge's turn, and no one wanted to miss a word. She tapped her pen lightly against the folder in front of her. Not fast, not angry, just thoughtful. Then, in a calm voice, she said, "Mr. Acosta, I believe that some people do change. I've seen it, but I've also seen people who only say the right words because they know it might help them avoid the real cost of their actions." Christopher's shoulders tensed. "I'm not saying your struggles aren't real," she added. "Epilepsy is serious. Being a father is serious. Taking care of a sick mother that matters. But you've had chances before, real ones. You were offered probation, treatment, support, and what did you do?" She glanced down at his file and then back up. "You violated it." Again and again. The courtroom felt even smaller now. The air heavier. Christopher's lawyer looked straight ahead, lips pressed together. The prosecutor didn't move at all. The judge continued, "You want me to believe that this time is different. But I see a man who can't remember the night he was found with enough drugs to get a whole block high. I see someone who blamed the party, blamed the alcohol, blamed the blackout, but I don't see ownership." Christopher opened his mouth slightly, but no words came out. He looked like he wanted to argue, maybe explain more, but nothing left. His lips, "I've been a judge for a long time," she said softly, "and I've learned that people don't always say what they mean, but their patterns, they tell the truth." She looked over at his lawyer. "I respect your arguments, and I appreciate your concern for his health. I truly do. But this court cannot ignore years of history just because of a few weeks of effort. Effort that only started after he got caught again." Christopher's face was tense, still no tears, but the stiffness in his jaw gave something away. He wasn't relaxed anymore. The judge leaned forward now. "Mr. Acosta, do you know how many men I've seen stand exactly where you are, say the exact same things, then walk out and do it all over again?" He nodded slightly. "Too many?" she said. "And I refuse to keep rewarding bad behavior with soft choices." Christopher's eyes dropped to the table. His lawyer stood quietly. "Your Honor, if I may," but she held up a hand. "I'll give you a moment in just a second." She turned her attention back to Christopher. "You said your kids think you're doing better, that they believe you're changing. But children are forgiving. They want to believe the best in their parents. They want to hold on to hope." She paused. "I'm not a child, I deal in facts. And the facts show that when no one's watching you, you go back to old habits." Now she nodded to his lawyer. He stood quickly. "Your Honor, I'm asking you to think of his family. He's not just a defendant, he's a caregiver, a father, a provider. This isn't just about his freedom, it's about his children's stability, his mother's health, his ability to continue seeking medical treatment. Sending him to prison may check a box, but it won't fix the deeper problem." He took a breath. "If you give him probation with mandatory outpatient treatment, random testing, and strict conditions, he'll be under constant watch. And if he fails, send him away. But please give him one last chance to prove he can stay on the right path." The judge didn't answer right away. Then she asked, "And what happens when his next blackout leads to a crash? Or worse, someone else getting hurt?" The lawyer didn't have a quick answer. Just silence. The judge sat back again. "I'm tired of cleaning up after disasters. I'm tired of looking into the eyes of parents, spouses, and children who lost someone to someone else's bad night." She took the file in front of her, closed it with a soft thud, and placed her pen neatly on top. "You say you're sorry," she said to Christopher. "But I think you're only sorry you got caught." The room stayed frozen. "I'm not making my decision lightly," she said. "But it's time the consequences match the truth." Christopher shifted in his seat. His eyes looked darker. Now, not angry, just empty. "I'll announce my decision shortly," the judge added, and gave a slight nod to the bailiff. "Take a short recess, 5 minutes." The gavel hit the desk once. The sound echoed sharply through the courtroom. Christopher didn't stand. He just sat there staring ahead, lips tight, shoulders heavy. For once, he looked like a man who finally realized this wasn't going his way. When the judge stepped out of the courtroom, the air seemed to shift. The wooden benches creaked as a few people moved or whispered, but most stayed silent. Christopher still didn't move. His hands were clenched in his lap, knuckles white. He looked down, eyes unfocused, as if trying to find some kind of answer. Inside the floor dot, his lawyer leaned in, voice low. She's not convinced, but she hasn't slammed the door shut. There's still a chance, but you have to look like you care. Christopher blinked. I do care, he whispered. You don't look like it, the lawyer said. You've got to show it because right now all she sees is your past. Christopher leaned back in the chair and rubbed his hands together slowly. My head's spinning, he murmured. I didn't sleep last night. Seizures. I had one this morning in the shower. The lawyer nodded. I know, but you've got to pull it together now. This is your moment, man. If you want to stay out of prison, it's now or never. A few minutes later, the judge returned. The courtroom stood as she entered, then sat down again. Her expression didn't give anything away. She looked at Christopher as if studying a puzzle she had seen before, one that never solved the way it promised to. Court is back in session, she said clearly. Mr. Acosta, you may be seated. Christopher was already sitting. He looked up, then quickly looked down again. The judge spoke slowly, not rushed. I've taken into account the arguments made. The defense has presented a picture of a man trying to change. A man who supports his mother, who wants to be a father to his children, and who suffers from a real medical condition. I do not doubt that these parts of your life are true. Christopher's lawyer watched closely, hopeful. For a second, it seemed the judge might be leaning their way. But, she said, her voice tightening, even the truth can feel weak when it stands next to a long pattern of failure. She turned to Christopher again. Let's talk plainly. Mr. Acosta, you've had years of chances. You've had deferred probation, treatment programs. Every time you've slipped back into the same life, drugs, alcohol, arrests, and even now, when you say you want to change, you can't even remember the night that brought you back here. Christopher opened his mouth, then stopped. He looked to his lawyer, who gave him a quick nod. I'm not trying to hide, Christopher said finally, voice low. I really don't remember that night. I was drinking. I was doing things I shouldn't have, but I'm not denying it. I admitted I was guilty. I'm not running from it. The judge nodded slowly. That's something, but it's not enough. She picked up the folder again and glanced at the reports. Your criminal history dates back to when you were 17. That's almost 2 decades of walking in and out of this system. And yes, you've had periods of staying out of trouble, but each time you've returned. Christopher's jaw clenched. His hands were back in his lap, fingers twitching. You say you want treatment? The judge continued. But is that because you truly want help or because you're afraid of prison? Christopher looked up again, this time directly at her. Both, he said honestly. That surprised some people. Even his lawyer looked at him sideways. I'm scared of prison, he said. Not just because it's prison, but because I don't know if I'll survive it. My seizures, they're real. They hit me out of nowhere. I've blacked out in the shower. At work, in the street, if I go in there and don't get the right meds, I could die in there. He took a deep breath. But I'm also tired of living like this. I know I've messed up. I've hurt people. My kids, they deserve better than a dad who keeps ending up in front of a judge. For a moment, it was quiet again. The judge stared at him. And what would you do differently if I gave you probation today? I'd go to every treatment session, he said. I'd take my meds, show up to check-ins, whatever it takes. I'd keep working, I'd keep showing up for my mom and my kids. And I'd prove that this isn't just words. The judge didn't respond right away. She glanced at the prosecutor, who had nothing more to say. Then she leaned forward, elbows. On the bench. I want to believe you, Mr. Acosta, she said. But I don't trust you yet, and that's the problem. Christopher nodded slowly. I understand. I haven't made my final decision, she said. But I need to hear. From your heart, not your lawyer, no more rehearsed lines. If there's anything you haven't said, now is the time. Christopher looked around the courtroom at the walls, the flags, the people sitting behind him. His girlfriend wasn't there. His kids weren't either, and for the first time, he looked alone. I just want one more shot, he said quietly. Not for me, but for them. And then he sat back down, unsure if it was too little, too late. The judge didn't speak for a long time. She just stared at Christopher like she was waiting to see something that still hadn't shown up. The courtroom felt like it was holding its breath. Even the clicking of the court reporter's keyboard had stopped. Everyone was still. Christopher sat perfectly still too, but it wasn't from confidence anymore. It was the weight of everything finally sinking in. His words were out there. His past was wide open on that judge's desk. His future? Hanging on whatever she was thinking in that long, quiet pause. The judge finally shifted in her seat. All right, she said softly, and the room braced itself. I've considered your statement. I've looked at the letters from your employer. I've read the PSI. I've heard from both sides. She looked down for a moment and tapped her finger twice on the table before speaking again. Here's what I've decided. Christopher leaned forward just slightly. I'm denying your application for probation. The words hit like a hammer. No one gasped out loud, but the tension in the room cracked wide open. Christopher blinked. Once, twice. His face didn't move much, but his hands did. They started shaking again. He looked to his lawyer, but the man was staring straight ahead. Jaw tight. I find that you are not a good candidate for probation, the judge said firmly. Too many violations, too many chances already lost. And right now, I don't believe the court has any reason to think this time will be different. Christopher didn't speak. His lawyer stood up slowly. Your Honor, if I may. With respect. I'd like to speak to the cap. She nodded. As the court knows, we have a cap of 10 years agreed upon, he said. But considering Mr. Acosta's ongoing medical condition, his responsibilities at home, and his role as caregiver to his elderly mother, I would ask that the court consider sentencing at the lowest end of that range. He paused to let that sink in. 2 years would allow him time to reflect and reset, but not take him away from his family for too long. He's not asking to walk free. He's asking for a punishment that gives him a chance to come back to the people who depend on him. The prosecutor stood up right after. Judge, we asked for the full 10. This man had multiple chances, multiple offers. And every time he returned to the same pattern. We're talking about dangerous behavior while on probation, drugs, and driving. The state believes maximum sentencing is fair and necessary. Christopher's eyes were wide now. He kept looking back and forth between the two lawyers like he was watching a tennis match, except every point might decide how many years of his life were about to vanish. The judge took a deep breath and looked down at the sentencing papers. In front of her, Mr. Acosta, she said, not looking up yet, you said earlier you were sorry, that you were tired of disappointing people, that you wanted a chance to prove you could change. He nodded quickly. Yes, ma'am. I believe you want to believe that, she said, finally lifting her eyes again. But words can only carry so much weight when they're buried under so many broken promises. He swallowed hard. The court has taken into consideration your previous CAS E2023C RIF4342 along with today's charges. There will be a $1,500. Fine, your license will be suspended for 2 years. You will get credit for time already served. She paused, then added, I am also requesting placement in a therapeutic community within the prison system, where you may receive addiction and health treatment. I can't promise they'll accept you, but I'll make that request official. Christopher was still stuck on the word prison. His hands dropped into his lap. His mouth opened, but no sound came out. And the judge finished. I sentence you to 8 years. That was it. No yelling. No slamming of fists. Just silence. 8.8 years away from his mother, his kids, his girlfriend, his business. His doctor. 8 years where the world would move forward and he wouldn't. He looked like he wanted to cry now, but the tears didn't come. Maybe he was still trying to look strong. Maybe he was still in shock. Or maybe, just maybe, he finally realized what it meant to run out of second chances. His lawyer sat back down, defeated. The prosecutor picked up his papers and tucked them into a folder like it was just another day. But for Christopher, it wasn't just another day. It was the end of all his excuses and the beginning of something far more real. The courtroom felt colder now. No one spoke. The judge had given our decision. 8 years. That number hung in the air like thick fog. It wasn't shouted. It wasn't dramatic. It was calm, final, and somehow that made it hit even harder. Christopher sat frozen. His mouth was slightly open, but no words came out. His lawyer didn't look at him. He was staring at the floor, as if trying to accept the loss himself. The judge shuffled a few papers in front of her, like she had moved on already. For her, this was done. For Christopher, it had just begun. Mr. Acosta, the judge said, voice steady but distant. I want to be clear about something. This court is not without compassion. I considered your health. I considered your children. I considered every word your lawyer said. But this is justice, not mercy. And justice is based on action, not promises. Christopher nodded slowly, but he looked as if he barely heard her. I've also signed the request for placement into a therapeutic community. She continued. If the prison system approves it, you may get the help you need there. But that is out of my hands now. He blinked again. His hands were resting in his lap, palms up, as if still waiting for something to be placed in them. But nothing came. You've also signed your trial court certification, the judge added. You understand you've waived your right to appeal due to your plea agreement? Yes, ma'am, he said softly, eyes still down. And as a convicted felon, you're no longer allowed to own or possess weapons or ammunition. If you have any questions about what that includes, speak to an attorney when released. He nodded again. The judge glanced toward the bailiff. Take him into custody. That was it. The bailiff stepped forward. Christopher stood up slowly, not resisting. He didn't argue, didn't protest. For the first time all day, he looked tired. Not the kind of tired that comes from working long hours, but the kind that settles into your bones. The tired of knowing you've lost something you can't get back. The bailiff took his wrists and gently placed the handcuffs on. The metal made a soft clicking sound, quiet but sharp. Everyone in the courtroom heard it. That was the sound of finality. Christopher stared at the cuffs like he'd never seen them before, but they fit too well. Like they'd been waiting. His lawyer stood, gave him a pat on the shoulder, and whispered something. Maybe stay strong. Maybe, I'm sorry. Whatever it was, Christopher didn't react. He just looked forward. The judge had already moved on to her next case. She didn't watch as he was led away. But the courtroom did. Each step Christopher took toward the door felt slower than the last. He turned his head once. Maybe he expected to see someone sitting in the back. His girlfriend, maybe. His kids, even his mother. But there was no one there. The benches were mostly empty now. He walked out alone, and when the door shut behind him, the echo stayed. A woman in the back of the room wiped her eyes. Maybe someone's relative. Maybe someone who had been on the same path once. Maybe someone who just didn't expect it to end that way, but it did. That's how justice works. Quiet. Sharp. Unforgiving when it needs to be. Christopher wasn't a monster. He wasn't violent. He didn't yell in court or curse the judge. But he was a man who got too used to being forgiven. Who thought one more chance would always be their until it wasn't. Now his job was gone. His family?
Still there, but far
away. His children would grow up 8 years older before he hugged them again. His mother, fragile and sick, might not even be here when he came back. That thought hit hardest. Back in the courtroom, the next name was called. Another case. Another face. Another story, but Christopher's part was over. For now, his story would continue behind locked doors and metal gates. Maybe he would finally get the treatment. Maybe he would change. Maybe this time, the silence would teach him more than words ever could. But one thing was certain. He walked in thinking the judge might believe in him. He walked out in cuffs, and this time, no one came running after him. The hallway outside the courtroom was long and quiet. The only sound came from the chains at Christopher's wrists and ankles as the bailiff guided him through a back door and down toward holding. The polished floor reflected the overhead lights.
But he didn't notice.
His eyes didn't lift from the ground. He wasn't crying, but something had changed. The weight on his shoulders had settled in fully now. The sentence wasn't just in the judge's words, it was in the silence of his
own thoughts. 8 years, 8 birthdays, 8 Christmases.
8 years of his kids becoming teenagers, possibly adults, without him around to guide them. Without even hearing his voice most days. Inside the holding area, there were no windows. Just white walls and a metal bench. The bailiff removed his cuffs from the front and told him to sit. Then he locked the ankle shackles to the bench and stepped back. Christopher sat down, hands resting between his knees. He stared at the floor. Everything was still. Everything was real now. He thought of his mother. How she'd call out for him every time she needed help up the stairs. How she liked it when he made her toast, even though she never asked for it. Would she still be okay without him there? Would his brothers step up or just drift away like
always? He thought of his girlfriend.
How she always showed up to court, held his hand when the judge wasn't looking, whispered that she believed in him even when he barely believed in himself. She hadn't made it to court today. He wondered if she knew. Maybe work got in the way. Or maybe she just couldn't take another sentencing. But mostly, he thought of his kids. His boy, 15, already taller than him, already pulling away, trying to be a man. His girl, 12, still calling him daddy, even though he barely showed up like one. He remembered the last time he dropped them off, how his son barely said goodbye, but his daughter hugged him hard, her tiny voice saying, "You're gonna be okay, right?" He hadn't answered. He just nodded. Now he knew he lied with that silence. The metal bench was cold beneath him. The minutes dragged. Somewhere above him, he could hear muffled voices through the ceiling, the courtroom moving on. More people standing where he just had, hoping their stories would end differently. A soft buzz broke the stillness. The door opened. A female deputy walked in with a clipboard. "Mr. Acosta, transport's here." He stood slowly, the chains clinking. Again as he rose. She unlocked the bench, then gestured toward the hallway. He followed her quietly, no words exchanged. As they walked, they passed a narrow window. Just one. The only one in the whole hallway. The light outside was soft late afternoon sun, golden and low in the sky. He stopped walking for just a second and turned his head. Through the glass, he saw people moving in the parking lot. A woman in scrubs hurrying to her car. A man loading groceries into a trunk. Kids in school uniforms laughing and chasing each other. Normal life. The kind that keeps moving while someone like him gets left behind. The deputy touched his shoulder lightly.
"Let's go." He nodded once.
Just once. When they reached the final door, he heard the loud clank of the Sallyport gate opening. 2 officers waited near a transport van. No one spoke. They moved like they had done this 1,000 times because they had. But to Christopher, this was the first time it felt like the end of something, not just another round in the system. As he stepped up into the van, one officer asked if he needed anything. Christopher hesitated. Then, quietly, he said, "Do you have a piece of paper?" The officer looked confused but handed him one. You need a pen too? Christopher nodded. They gave it to him. He sat down on the bench inside, cuffs still on. The van doors were still open, the breeze brushing in. He leaned forward, rested the paper on his knee, and began to write. He didn't know how to say everything, but he wrote anyway. Dear kids, I know I wasn't there when you needed me most. I thought I was protecting you by staying away during the worst parts. I was wrong. I messed up, and now I have to pay for it. But I want you to know something. This isn't the end of me. It's the start of something new. I'm going to use this time to become the man you deserve, not with words, with action. Love, Dad. He folded the paper slowly, tucked it into the small envelope the officer had handed him. He looked out the door one more time. Then the metal doors closed. And the van pulled away. Maybe the world would forget him for a while, but he didn't plan to stay forgotten.